First, let me say welcome to all of you who are coming back again this semester, and for those who are new this semester, we are very glad you're here as well. I also want to say thank you. Thank you to all of you who have been praying hard and contributing and looking for other ways and other efforts to help the people of Haiti. We'll have a moment at the conclusion of the chapel to think and pray for our brothers and sisters there. Well, I hope this semester will be the best yet for all of you, and especially those of you who are about to graduate, and can you believe it? Just a little over 3 months. If what I say this morning doesn't resonate with you, perhaps when my comments are dissected and reinterpreted on YouTube as a sequel to the very funny clip entitled "The Wise Sayings of Jimmy B," you will find something meaningful to contemplate at least there, and that's for you, Jordan and Michael. All right. For now, I'd like to consider the words of the Apostle Paul to the Corinthians when he makes the claim that Jesus is God's yes. It's quite a Christological statement. Jesus is God's yes and amen. And that God's yes and our yes together makes for a wonderfully glorious combination. In order to fully appreciate the meta-yeses of Apostle Paul's claim, it's also important that we understand and think about the meta-no's in life as well. Truth be told, if you took a jar and you put a penny for all the no's that you and I have received in life, put a penny in the jar and took a penny out for all the yeses, that jar, I'm guessing, would never empty. The no's of life so often are much greater than life's yeses. When I was a kid, our talking parakeet named Perky, in a voice quite similar to my mother, would say things like, "Stop it, boys," and "No, don't do that." He never got around to saying, "Yes, you can, go for it." I'm not blaming Perky or my mother. I mean, it isn't easy raising 3 active boys and a girl without a lot of no's in the process. If you Google "just say no," you'll get 160 million hits. Just say no, we know the familiar ones, to drugs, sex, and rock and roll. Just say no to the federal government, to war, to fossil fuels. Just say no, this was a new one to me, to the Zuzu hamster, to Cheerios, and believe it or not, just say no to Girl Scout cookies. Why, I don't know. Saying no a lot isn't necessarily a bad thing. Psychologist Susan Newman, author of the Book of No, 250 Ways to Say It and Mean It, suggests that sometimes the no's of life keep us from making big mistakes. Sometimes they set limits on less than good behavior and help us deal with life's disappointments. Life's no's teach us how to argue a point or to prioritize what's important. A no can even lead us to the next great opportunity. I remember when I tried to get my first book published, I got a list, a growing list, I should say, over and over rejection slips. And it was only until I looked back, I was glad that all the other publishers said no, because the one who said yes, I think, was the best among them. Gerald Schlabach, Goshen College alum, and associate professor of theology at the University of St. Thomas, in his forthcoming memoir of his conversion from Mennonite to Roman Catholic faith, claims that Goshen College has a distinct school of thought, which he calls a culture of dissent. By such an accounting, here at Goshen College, we have no difficulty just saying no, except in PC when it comes to making budget decisions. Well, we come to such an ethos quite honestly. Take a brief journey back in time with me and in order to put our culture of dissent into perspective. The founders of the Mennonite movement nearly 500 years ago, in no uncertain terms, just said no. They just said no to the fundamental religious and civil order of the time. They just said no to the church and state union that had been dominating the world for some 1,000 years. They championed human freedom and separation of church and state, and they were persecuted and executed for those beliefs which have since been enshrined in all Western democracies. No wonder they have been described by historians and others as radical dissenters, sectarian naysayers, and prophetic nonconformists. These early Mennonite Anabaptists were also idealists and perfectionists for whom the word compromise was considered sinful. Unfortunately, because so many of them were silenced and killed during these early years of their life together, they never really had the opportunity to try to put into practice a model for social and political life together that might actually have played out in the world of nations and cultures where compromise can be seen as a positive norm. Like many others before and since, these early forebears of Goshen College divided the world in two: compromisers and non-compromisers, between yay and nay, between political leaders and prophets, between administrators and agitators, between the establishment and the protesters or Protestants, between the institutions and the individual. Clearly, they came down on the side of the prophetic dissenter, largely based, in my opinion, on a somewhat narrow understanding of biblical prophets as primarily naysayers and exclusively critical. From 1924, by my reckoning, 30 years into the history of Goshen College, until at least 1989, the normative school of thought at Goshen was that of radical dissent, non-conforming idealism, and prophetic disestablishmentarianism expialidocious. I just threw that part in. There were more no's than yeses. During those years, the famous Dean H.S. Bender, wrote a manifesto called the Anabaptist Vision, in which he called all true Christians to, and I'm quoting, withdraw from the worldly system and create a Christian social order within the fellowship of the church. Goshen College historian Guy Hirschberger, author of War, Peace, and Non-Resistance, added his support to the growing orthodoxy of Goshen College's culture of dissent, at least on the question of war and non-resistance. Soon, there became a fixed canon of thought about what it meant to be Mennonite, or at least a Goshen College Mennonite, or a Goshen College student. Such a consensus lasted until about the early 1960s, when it began to unravel as more people began to embrace social action and nonviolent resistance, as opposed to non-resistance, as legitimate expressions of dissent. The greatest advocate and facilitator of this radical dissent school of thought was one of the 20th century's leading ethicists and theologians, Goshen College alumnus, John Howard Yoder. You can even, if you imagine this, get a PhD in Yoderian studies now at Duke University. There's a goal to try to accomplish.